Welcome, everybody, to the ALGS LAN Roundup. We've just watched the end of Group 3. I'm your host, Joe, aka McFlugmuffin, joined by Miles. I'm going to hand over to you, Miles, to talk us through the top 3 teams in both of the groups in that round.
Well, honestly, let me just preface this and saying that round 3 was something else completely. We had TSM playing zone. I don't think I'd ever seen that happen. Alliance, as usual, popping off absolutely in B versus C. All sorts of crazy things. For example, in the B versus C game, in the last game of this series, of today's games, we saw less than 10 squads in Ring 3. What is this? Are we playing Diamond Ranked or something? Honestly, it's absolutely insane, some of the stuff that we saw. But to break it down, we had STK, which is Storaiku. This is the APAC South team from Australia. We've got EMP or Empire, once again, doing extremely well, pulling out that Mad Maggie on World's Edge. But honestly, not going too well for them on World's Edge, mostly just their Stormpoint games. And we have CLG getting, once again, a very strong Stormpoint side, similar to EMP, and getting third place with 52 points. Now, in the B stream, Group B versus C, we have, once again, as I already said, Alliance with 92 points, honestly, absolutely destroying the lobby, with top 5 finishes in every single game. We've got OG getting a consistent placement between, 9th and 1st, with a very solid game to finish it off. That's 12 kills to win the last game of the day. And then in 3rd place, we have Burger with a respectable showing. We have 1 win, a 2nd place, and, a mixed bag for the rest of the games. But, a win is a win, and the placement is good.
Yeah, I mean, something I want to pick up on here is that A versus D standings, because CLG coming in 3rd place with 52 points. Now, this is a respectable score. When I click over to round 2, they came 20th. When I click over to round 1, they came 15th. And really, that placement in that last set, that shows what they can do. But unfortunately, the rest of their rounds just weren't up to scratch. And, that's really disappointing. The 3rd place is good. They should take it and they should feel good about themselves. But, maybe they should have just switched on a little bit earlier. But also, I want to bring up Sutaraiku, a team that have, they've made some moves throughout the day. They haven't been doing amazingly. They haven't appeared in the top 3, but they've been sitting roughly middle of the table throughout the day. And now coming in 1st in that group, that's going to really boost their scores and, get them into the winners bracket as we see.
And equally, something I wanted to mention is that Storaiku got the first and only 2-win streak in the entire tournament thus far. Honestly, absolutely fantastic watching the first 2 games on World's Edge, getting 1st place with 11 points. That's a 23-point game. And then a 1st place with 6 points the following game. That is obviously only worth 18, but still very, very strong from Storaiku.
Yeah, I mean, almost 50 points between those 2 games. And when I look over at the overall leaderboard for today, that changed everything for them. Within that last round, they jumped 16 places up the table. They went from, relatively in the middle, about 26th place, up to 10th. And those 2 wins, that's what caused that change. And, they've got to be really happy with that showing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the score that they got in round 3 was pretty much the same as their combined score from the previous 2 rounds. So a really, really good showing, and they really managed to turn it around, I've got to say.
Yeah, but I think the A versus D standings are strange because 2 of those teams we haven't seen too much of today. When we look over at B versus C standings, well, there's 2 teams that we have seen a lot of, Alliance and OG, 2 of our top dogs today. Alliance, as you said, 92 points. They didn't get a win in that set, but every single round they were in the top 4. 2 second places, 2 third places, 2 fourth places, and at least 5 kills in every single match. One even having 16 kills. That is just domination. Maybe they couldn't take it all the way, but I think maybe they just said to themselves, like, well, it's the last set. Let's just have some fun. Let's just get some kills and, relax a little bit before tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to fully agree with you on that. One thing I did want to mention was that despite TSM winning the first game almost for free with only 5 kills, they pretty much, very surprisingly, played hard zone as they were able to get the best spot in zone and then just, cleaned up the fight at the end, only getting 5. they had a rather disappointing couple of games, getting a 19th place and an 18th place in the last game on each map, respectively. Honestly, it's very surprising seeing a team that, everyone is rooting for and, has a lot of authority, perhaps is the right word to use when describing TSM, is what with Hal being known as the CEO of Apex Legends. And honestly, it's really, really quite disappointing. However, they did just about manage to clinch into the top 20, which means that they will be going through to the winners bracket tomorrow.
Yeah, and there are other teams we, of course, almost have to bring up. NRG, with their first, really standout performance of the day. Obviously, in rounds 1 and 2, they're coming in 15th, they're coming in 7th. That's okay, but not great. Today, in this last round, they came in 4th place with 47 points, only a little bit behind Burger, and they did get a win in that. So, that's a much better showing from them. Again, much like TSM, that's going to give them those extra couple of points they need in order to make it into the winners bracket. Both TSM and NRG sitting right at the bottom of that zone, only 7 and 8 points above being in the losers bracket. But that is enough points to get yourself in there, and that's going to be huge for them going into day 2. And I have a sneaking suspicion it may have been tactical that they didn't show up as much as they could have done today.
Yeah, no, I can entirely understand where you're coming from with that. I'm very certain that a lot of these teams won't be, pulling out all the shots until it really, really counts. And you could make the argument that today it did count, Getting into that winners bracket means that there's one less series that you potentially have to play. But given that it's a double elimination, I guess they'd rather take the chance and go with the quote unquote easier lobby. By no means are these lobbies going to be easy, what with them being the top 40 teams in the world. But, perhaps they were just looking for that potential way of sneaking in. Although, obviously, in NRG and TSM's case, they are in that upper lobby for the start of tomorrow. Now, one thing I did want to talk about were some of these perhaps less known teams, such as FSV and Daewoo, both, placing pretty highly within the standings overall. Not so much in lobby in the third round for FSV, but they did manage to qualify in 5th place, which is an honestly really, really impressive showing. Even despite the fact they only received 19 points in the third round, while receiving 55 and 60 in the previous 2.
Yeah, I mean, what is worth mentioning is that between their first 2 rounds, they did get 115 points. So I don't know if they were taking this last set that seriously. I think for a lot of teams, when you're sat on 115 points, which is enough to get you through just off 2 sets, maybe you say, well, let's just take a backseat in this one. Let's just chill out a bit because 18 games in a day is going to be very, very stressful. Sure, in rank, that might be easy, but in comp, that is a lot and a lot of focus you're putting in, a lot of physical strain on the mind and the body. So maybe they just said to themselves, let's chill out. We're probably going to get through as long as we just get a couple of points here and there. And, that's exactly what happened. They didn't need any of the points they gained in set 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we started to see was some of the teams that, perhaps took a little while to get going today, kind of finally reaching, a sort of sense of consistency, which perhaps they lacked earlier on in the day. Teams like United, honestly, a fantastic showing despite, really having some tough ring pulls to deal with and not having that Gibby bubble since they're playing Watson, Crypto, and Valk means, they honestly did really well to get 2 second place finishes in what were some very difficult games for them to get such good placement in. Obviously finishing 4th in their bracket.
Yeah, and I mean there are some teams where I'm disappointed with in that third set. I must say, Detonator being one of those. Third place in round 2. I thought maybe this was their chance. They'd found their groove and they were gonna, put something together and actually score some points. But they came dead last in round 3, just 9 points, on par with Singularity, a team that only has 2 people in it today. Hopefully tomorrow they have 3. But Detonator, they round 2, they got their foot in the door, but they just couldn't quite get their whole body in round 3.
One thing I really wanted to mention, I think if there's any of the games that you absolutely have to watch, it's got to be Game 2 from A versus D. We had 10 squads in the final ring, and honestly, watching the chaos unfold was, really quite something to behold. In that game, CLG managed to clutch up and get the win with 13 kills. But, honestly, probably one of the most amazing final zones I've ever seen. Just everything leading up from, say, the start of round 3 close all the way through to that end game. Honestly, that is peak Apex.
Yeah, I mean, we did have some really insane matches in this last set. One team I want to talk about is Team Liquid. Now, round 1 and round 2, they did very well. First place in round 1, second place in round 2. Not quite as good from them in round 3, only a 6th place in our second lobby, but that's not important because they got those two good placements, those good points early on. And as with 4-7, they were able to sit back, take it a bit more calmly. Because, of course, while doing well in the winners bracket, the difference between first and 10th there is noticeable. Today, as long as you're in the top 20, you're in the top 20 and you're in the winners bracket, and there's absolutely no difference. So they're not really complaining about dropping from that first place spot after round 2 down to third. But I'm just going to run through the top 5 teams of our overall leaderboard from today. Alliance coming in first with 205 points, the only team to break a total of 200 points today. OG right below them on 186. So Alliance actually had quite a lead over them at the end with 92 points in round 3. That was going to be the case. Team Liquid, again, about 20 points further down, 168 points overall. With that weaker showing in round 3, they weren't quite at the top, but, that's fine. Empire in 4th place, jumping 5 places after round 2, 146 total points. A really good showing from them in round 3 to jump up the leaderboard and show that they are here to play, they are here to win. And then that team, FSV, 4-7, an APAC team in 5th place, 134 points overall. A very weak showing in this last round, but that may have been entirely intentional. And I think that looking at this overall leaderboard, I see a really good mix of teams, not just in terms of ability, but also in terms of region and play style. Obviously, as we said, NRG and TSM both qualifying for NA. Team Liquid really putting in that showing. OG, Alliance, all these NA and EMEA teams, but also 4-7, STK, Dua. They're all those APAC teams that, I thought maybe we're going to have some challenges coming in, but they're still showing up and they're getting into the winners bracket.
Honestly, today I think the most heartbreaking thing for a lot of us Brits out there is watching just how hard of a time IG's had today. As a supporter of people from England, what with there not being too many people in esports, at least from the player perspective, we've only really got representation fully from IG, and then you've got Yuki in Alliance, and then a couple of subs here and there that are actually representing the country. It's really just so sad to see a team that did so well in the previous split, fall from grace, and especially what with them playing so well in tournaments coming up recently, that have just gone. Evidently, whatever was happening, it just wasn't working, and you could see that when they decided to switch from a crypto comp, playing perhaps a little bit more conservative, to putting Bryn on the Ash and just playing straight up Valk, Gibby, and Ash. They're just like doing everything they can to look for fights. And honestly, from what I saw when watching them, it seemed like every time they got themselves into a position where they were going to win a fight, unfortunately, the third party had to come in, and it just didn't work out. Equally, I think the most heartbreaking moment of today for them was probably in one of the last games when they were trying to rotate in through the tunnel towards Skyhook. When they did so, what they were met with was caustic traps and none other than the Mad Maggie using EMP. And honestly, watching that fight go down where Bryn gets taken out almost instantaneously was just, really sad, I'm sure, for anyone who supports IG.
Yeah, I mean, it's really telling that even the teams in the losers bracket, I mean, losers bracket makes it sound so bad, but even some of those teams are super scary. Teams that we're all familiar with, and they've been very, very strong working up to this event, and yet they're still not able to come out in the top half. G2, SSG, Crazy Raccoons, as I said, Detonator, CLG, GMT, these are all great teams that aren't able to break through into that top half. And that really speaks to the difficulty of these lobbies, of how skilled those top players of Alliance and OG are to be able to be so dominant. But also, there's teams like Scars who are really feeling bad right now. Obviously, they aren't able to field Mandy, and that for them, it seems to have caused a lot of problems. Their sub is playing his best, but unfortunately, I don't think it's quite enough. And they sit all the way down in 33rd place, just, you know, a little bit above IG. I mean, there's 4 teams tied for 33rd place today. But when you're that low down, it doesn't really matter. And that's all from us for our third ALGS roundup of the day. And that's it for day 1 of the ALGS LAN. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you tomorrow for more roundups.